Sophia Bennett never thought her life would lead her into a world of lies, expensive suits, and the gaze of a man who could change her entire existence with a single word. She was content in her little bubble, waking up before dawn to knead dough in the bakery where she worked, coming home to her small apartment, and counting the last of her coins to make sure the bills were covered. It was an ordinary, predictable life, and though it was hard, Sophia was used to it. She was the kind of woman who accepted what fate had handed her, even when it was unfair. Her younger sister Emily, however, had never learned such acceptance. Emily was beautiful, spoiled, and carefree, fluttering from one social event to another like a butterfly. Where Sophia wore plain clothes and simple shoes, Emily owned dresses that sparkled and makeup palettes worth more than Sophia's weekly paycheck. Their Aunt Grace doted on Emily, always scheming to marry her off to a wealthy man who could restore the Bennett family's lost reputation. That was how the mess began. One evening, Emily stormed into their apartment with a face full of panic and a shimmering gown tossed over her arm. "Sophie," she said breathlessly, "I need you to do something for me. Just once, please." Sophia, who had just returned from work with her hands dusted in flour, looked up tiredly. "What now?" Emily bit her lip. "Aunt Grace set me up on a blind date tonight. Some rich CEO. Widower. Father, way too serious. I can't go. I have other plans. But if I don't show up, Aunt Grace will never forgive me." Sophia frowned, her chest tightening. "So you want me to lie? To pretend to be you? It's just dinner," Emily said quickly. "Sit there, smile, let him talk, and leave. He'll never call again, and Aunt Grace won't know the difference. Please, Sophie, you're the only one I can count on." Sophia's first instinct was to refuse. But she looked at her sister's pleading face, at the tears threatening to spill, and she remembered all the times she had protected Emily before. Once again, Sophia would sacrifice for her. She always did. Hours later, dressed in Emily's gown and with her hair styled awkwardly, Sophia stood before a luxury restaurant she had never dared to enter in her life. Her heart pounded as she walked inside. Chandeliers glistened, and the air smelled of fine wine. And then she saw him. Alexander Carter sat in the corner, his tall frame wrapped in a perfectly cut suit. His dark hair was brushed back, his jawline sharp, his eyes as cold and commanding as the city skyline. He was more intimidating than she had expected, yet when he stood to greet her, there was an old-fashioned courtesy in the way he pulled out her chair. "Emily Bennett." His voice was deep, smooth, but edged with authority. Sophia's breath caught. She forced a smile and nodded. "Yes, Emily." Dinner began awkwardly, but soon she realized he wasn't the arrogant businessman she had imagined. He asked questions, not about money or social status, but about her life, her thoughts, her small joys. When she admitted softly, "I spend most of my time baking," his eyebrows lifted in surprise. "A baker?" he asked, and when she nodded nervously, a genuine smile touched his lips. "That's refreshing. Most women I meet talk only of galas and designer labels." She laughed lightly. "Sorry to disappoint." "You don't disappoint," he said firmly, his gaze locking on hers until her cheeks grew warm. Something shifted in her chest. This was supposed to be a lie, a night she would forget, but it was far from forgettable. The evening ended with him offering to drive her home. She declined, terrified her lie would unravel, but as she walked away, he said something that echoed in her mind long after. "Perhaps next time, you'll allow me to." She told herself there wouldn't be a next time. But fate had other plans. Days later, while delivering cupcakes to a cafe, a small boy ran straight into her. "Sorry, miss," he said brightly, eyes wide and innocent. Before she could reply, a familiar voice spoke. "Careful, Ethan." Sophia turned, her stomach lurching. Alexander Carter stood there, papers in hand, watching her with quiet intensity. "Emily," he said smoothly, as though their meeting was no coincidence. Sophia's throat went dry. She nodded, unable to correct him with the little boy watching. Ethan tugged at her sleeve. "You smell like cake. Do you make cakes?" Sophia laughed nervously. "Something like that." "Join us," Alexander said, his tone making it less of a suggestion and more of a command. That day, she sat across from him and his son, watching the boy chatter with endless energy while Alexander listened with quiet patience. For the first time, Sophia saw not just a CEO, but a father, a man who carried the weight of responsibility in his eyes, but whose heart softened for his child. From then on, she saw them again and again. Sometimes Alexander invited her for coffee, Sometimes Ethan begged her to join them at the park. Slowly, Sophia's heart betrayed her. She loved Ethan's laughter, his way of slipping his hand into hers like she belonged there. And Alexander, the man who once seemed cold and distant, revealed a side of himself she had never expected. He listened to her, he valued her words, he smiled more when she was near. But every moment was built on a lie. She wasn't Emily, she was just Sophia, the poor sister, the one who barely had enough to pay rent. One evening, after Ethan had fallen asleep in her lap while they watched a movie, Alexander looked at her with an expression that made her heart race. "You're different, Emily," he said quietly. "Different in ways I didn't expect. I can't seem to let you leave." Tears burned her eyes. She wanted to tell him everything, but she looked down at Ethan's sleeping face and couldn't bear to break the fragile happiness they had found. The truth came crashing down when Emily herself appeared at Alexander's office weeks later. Dressed in expensive clothes, she smiled as she held out a hand. "I'm Emily Bennett." Alexander's face hardened instantly. "What is this supposed to mean?" Emily smirked. "No games. My sister must have gone in my place that night. Typical Sophia, always meddling." Sophia, standing frozen in the doorway, felt her world collapse. Alexander's eyes turned on her, filled with cold betrayal. "Sophia," her lips trembled. "I'm sorry." The silence that followed was unbearable. She left his office with tears streaming down her cheeks, convinced she had lost both him and Ethan forever. Days passed in misery until one evening, a black car pulled up outside the bakery. Alexander stepped out, his face unreadable. "Get in," he said quietly. The ride was tense until he finally spoke. "You lied to me, but you were honest in everything else. You never pretended about who you are, and that is what stayed with me." Sophia blinked, stunned. He went on, his voice softer. "Ethan hasn't stopped asking for you. And neither have I. You think being poor makes you unworthy, but what you've given us is worth more than anything money can buy." Her throat tightened. "But your world, your reputation." "I don't care about reputation," he interrupted firmly. "I care about the woman who made my son laugh again. I care about the woman who made me feel alive after years of emptiness. And that woman is you, Sophia." Tears streamed down her face as he reached for her hand. From that day forward, their lives intertwined. Society whispered, critics doubted, but Sophia stood firm with Alexander. At her side, Ethan introduced her proudly to everyone as "my Sophie." And Alexander, though still the fearsome CEO to the world, never let her doubt how much she meant to him. One evening, as the three of them walked through the park, Ethan chasing fireflies ahead of them, Alexander leaned close. His voice was warm against her ear. "That first night, when you sat across from me, I knew something was different. You're the only one I couldn't let leave." Sophia smiled through her tears, her heart full. "And I never wanted to." Together, they watched Ethan laugh and run, their hands entwined, their hearts bound by the family they had finally become.